She's been ringing up groceries at your local store for 20 years. You've walked past her. Maybe you've sighed at the slow line, or barely looked up from your phone while she bagged your things. And yet, this ordinary woman, in the same worn-out uniform, driving the same aging car home every night, is sitting on more than $1 million, and not a single person around her has any idea. She didn't win the lottery. She didn't inherit a dime. She never made some genius crypto bet at 3 in the morning. What she did was far more dangerous for anyone living on autopilot. She quietly broke, one by one, 7 money rules most of us were taught to treat as gospel. I spent months studying 50 people just like her. A teacher who never once cracked 6 figures, an HVAC repairman driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it, a nurse you'd never look at twice in a crowded room. None of them look wealthy. That's exactly why they are. Meanwhile, there's another kind of person. The one with the least German sedan, the impressive zip code, the vacation photos everyone likes. And behind the curtain, there's often almost nothing left. 2 completely different lives, crossing paths on the same street every single day, and nobody can tell them apart just by looking. The 7 rules these 50 people broke aren't complicated. They don't require luck, inheritance, or a stroke of genius. But they go against nearly everything you've been told about earning, spending, and saving. And once you realize which one is quietly sabotaging your finances right now, there's a good chance you'll never follow it again. Hey, I'm Megan, and before we get into the 7 rules, I need to tell you why this study hit me so hard. The largest millionaire study ever conducted in this country surveyed over 10,000 of them, and the results basically tear up the script we've all been sold. 79% received 0 inheritance. 8 out of 10 grew up middle income or below. Their most common careers weren't hedge fund manager or tech founder. They were engineer, accountant, teacher, manager. People you'd walk right past without a second thought. That changes everything, because it means this path isn't reserved for people born with a head start. It's wide open. It's just slow, quiet, and honestly kind of boring, which is exactly why almost nobody sticks with it. And that's the whole reason this channel exists. Breaking down, with real numbers and zero fluff, how completely ordinary people build real wealth while everyone else stays busy trying to look rich. If this kind of content is useful to you, hit subscribe right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it's genuinely the biggest reason this video reaches more people who need to hear it. Drop a like too, because that's what tells the algorithm this story is worth putting in front of someone else. And before we dive in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country and city in the comments. I read almost every single one, and I love seeing how many places this conversation about money reaches. Now, let's get into rule number 1. It's the one almost everyone breaks without even realizing it. Rule 1. They broke the belief that you need a big paycheck to get rich. Here's the thinking almost everyone carries around without ever questioning it. Once I make more, I'll start saving. Once that raise finally lands, I'll figure out investing. The quiet millionaires flipped that completely. They stopped obsessing over the number at the top of their paycheck and started obsessing over one number instead. The gap between what came in and what went out. Not the salary, the gap. Take Cheryl, a middle school teacher. She retired with just over $1.6 million, and she never once earned more than $70,000 a year in her entire life. On paper, she has no business being a millionaire. But starting in her mid-20s, she quietly funneled 15% of every single paycheck straight into her retirement account and never touched it. Never once. That's roughly $750 a month. Nothing dramatic. Invested at the market's long-run average of about 10% a year, left alone for 3 decades. That habit turned into over $1.6 million. She didn't out-earn the people around her. She outsaved every one of them. I'll be honest, the first time I ran this math on my own paycheck, I felt a little sick. Not because the number was scary, because it wasn't. The gap I needed wasn't some heroic sacrifice. It was smaller than what I was already losing to things I couldn't even name a month later. Here's why this beats chasing a bigger paycheck almost every time. A high income looks like wealth without actually being wealth. A surgeon pulling in $400,000 a year with 2 leased luxury cars and a jumbo mortgage can easily be worth less than the teacher who quietly saved a fraction of that. Income is what lands in your account. Wealth is what stays there. The study behind this proves it. Only about a third of 10,000 surveyed millionaires ever average 6 figures in their careers. Teachers outnumbered CEOs on that list. So here's the uncomfortable part, and also the freeing part. You don't need a bigger paycheck's permission to start. You need a wider gap, starting with the very next check that hits your account. And here's the quiet trick that made it effortless for her. She automated it. The money moved out the same day the paycheck landed, before she ever saw it, before she had the chance to spend it. Willpower at the end of the month almost never survives real life. Money that disappears before you notice it, that survives everything. Cheryl never once felt like she was budgeting. She just lived on whatever was left, after her future had already been paid first. Rule 2. They broke the belief that money is for looking successful. Somewhere along the way, most of us absorbed the idea that wealth is supposed to be visible. The car in the driveway, the watch on the wrist, the address, the vacation photos. The quiet millionaires did the exact opposite, on purpose. They understood something most people never stop to think about. Every dollar spent proving you have money is a dollar that can no longer go out and make you more of it. Take Roland. He repairs air conditioners for a living, and he's worth roughly $2 million. He drives a work truck with over 200,000 miles on it. His neighbors assume he's barely getting by, same as everyone else on the block. That invisibility isn't an accident, it's the entire strategy. Looking a little broke is exactly how he got rich. The study found these millionaires spend $200 a month or less eating out. They clip coupons without a shred of embarrassment. They live in homes far cheaper than what they could technically afford. They're not cheap for the sake of it. They're ruthless about where every single dollar goes. There's a name for what's happening underneath this: lifestyle signaling. When you buy things to look rich, you build a cage around yourself without realizing it. The nicer car demands pricier insurance, costlier repairs, a bigger garage. Every upgrade permanently raises the floor of what your life costs. A new car loses a massive chunk of its value the second you drive it off the lot and keeps bleeding value every year after. Roland could drive whatever he wants. He chooses the old truck because the difference, invested, means far more to him than the admiration of strangers he'll never see again. So, ask yourself something blunt and answer it honestly. How much of what you buy is actually for you, and how much of it is a performance for an audience that isn't even watching? Rule 3. They broke the belief that you wait until you're ready to invest. Almost everyone treats investing as something that happens later, once the debt's gone, once the emergency fund is full, once life finally settles down. The quiet millionaires understood something the waiters never grasp. The most important ingredient in building wealth isn't money, it's time, and time is the one resource you can never earn back once it's spent. Here's the math that changes how you see this. Doreen, a dental hygienist, started investing $500 a month at age 23. Nothing fancy, just steady and automatic. By 65, that quiet habit had grown to more than $3 million. Now imagine she'd waited just 10 years and started at 33 instead. Same $500 a month, same market, same everything. She'd have finished with about $1.1 million. That single 10-year delay wouldn't have cost her a little. It would have cost her roughly $2 million. Sit with that for a second, because it might be the single most important idea in this whole video. Those extra 10 years of contributions only added up to about $60,000 more out of her own pocket, but those early dollars had the most time to grow on top of themselves. And that stacking is where the real money hides. There's an old rule of thumb worth remembering. Money invested at the market's long-run return roughly doubles every 7 years. A dollar invested at 25 gets to double 4 or 5 times before retirement. A dollar invested at 45 barely doubles twice. Same dollar. wildly different destiny. If you take one single thing from this video, let it be this. The best moment to start was years ago. The second best moment is the one you're sitting in right now, before this video even ends. Rule 4. Smart money doesn't actually beat the market. Turn on financial television for 10 minutes, and you'll hear the same message on a loop. The winners pick the right stocks, spot the next big thing before the crowd, time their way in and out with perfect precision. The quiet millionaires ignored almost every word of it. They never tried to beat the market. They bought the entire market instead, and then did the single hardest thing in all of investing: absolutely nothing. Vincent, a lineman for a power company, is worth about $1.4 million. Ask him his strategy, and he'll just shrug. He buys a low-cost index fund tracking the S&P 500 every single payday, and he never sells. When the 2008 crash wiped out roughly half the market, he didn't flinch. In early 2020, when prices fell by a third in a matter of weeks, he held on and let his automatic buys keep running. While panicked traders were dumping shares at the very bottom, Vincent was quietly scooping up the same fund at a steep discount. There's a hidden edge in that boring, low-cost fund, too. A fund charging a tiny sliver of a percent instead of the 1 or 2% many actively managed funds quietly skim off the top every year can leave hundreds of thousands of extra dollars in your account across a lifetime. Here's why this quiet approach wins, and the data is honestly brutal. The market has returned about 10% a year over the long run, but one widely cited J.P. Morgan analysis found the average investor actually earned closer to 3% because they bought high out of excitement and sold low out of fear. Watch what that gap does. $500 a month at 10% grows to about $1.1 million over 30 years. That same $500 a month at 3% limps to under $290,000. Same money, same years. Nearly $1 million lost entirely to emotion. Nearly all the quiet millionaires kept a cushion of cash in a high-yield savings account, the kind paying around 4% right now, so a job loss or a busted furnace never forced them to sell at the worst possible moment. They made peace with an uncomfortable fact. The market only lands near that 10% average in a handful of years and finishes negative roughly 1 year out of every 4. They won by refusing to play the frantic game everyone else kept losing. Quick word before the last 3 rules, because this is where it turns practical. If these breakdowns are useful to you, subscribe and stick around. I walk through the real math behind building wealth on an ordinary paycheck every single week. No hype, no shortcuts. And if you haven't already, drop your country and city in the comments. I genuinely want to know how far this is reaching. Rule 5. Debt as a tool isn't the flex people think it is. There's a popular, clever-sounding argument out there. Never pay off your house early, keep the mortgage, hold on to the tax break, invest the difference. Let inflation quietly shrink the debt for you. It sounds sophisticated on a spreadsheet. The quiet millionaires mostly didn't buy it. When the study looked at how these people actually built their wealth, 2 unglamorous moves showed up over and over. They invested steadily in their retirement plan, and they bought a home, then paid it completely off. Pearl, a county bookkeeper, and her husband threw every spare dollar at their mortgage for years and burned it off more than a decade ahead of schedule. The spreadsheet crowd would say that was a mistake, that she left money on the table by not investing every dollar instead. Maybe on paper, but a paid-off house did something no spreadsheet can measure. It dropped the running cost of her entire life to almost nothing, which meant she could take bigger swings, ride out a layoff, and invest hard without a knot of fear in her stomach. And notice what these people avoided completely: consumer debt. Not one of the 50 quiet millionaires studied was carrying a balance on a credit card at 20-something% interest. The exact compounding that builds your fortune in the market is the same force quietly destroying you inside a credit card, just spinning in the opposite direction. The typical homeowner in America holds a net worth near $400,000. The typical renter sits closer to $10,000. Owning your home outright never makes for an exciting story at a party. It just happens to be the foundation almost every quiet fortune in this study was built on. And there's a benefit that never shows up on a balance sheet at all: sleep. A scary headline about layoffs doesn't tighten your chest the same way when you owe nothing to anyone. Rule 6. They broke the belief that you reward yourself the moment a raise comes in. This one feels almost cruel to argue against, because on the surface, it feels so fair. You worked hard, the raise showed up, you deserve to enjoy it. And enjoying some of it truly is fine. But the quiet millionaires spotted a quiet trap tucked inside that logic. A trap called lifestyle creep. Every time your income climbs and your spending climbs right along with it, you stay exactly as far from wealthy as you were the day before, just surrounded by slightly nicer stuff. Nolan, an engineer, made one quiet decision in his late 20s that ended up building his entire fortune. Every time a raise came through, he banked it instead of absorbing it. His day-to-day life in his 40s looked almost identical to his life at 30, even though his income had roughly doubled. That widening gap between his flat spending and his rising pay went straight into the market, month after month. A single $500 a month raise, invested instead of spent, grows to roughly $250,000 over 25 years. He did that across several raises, stacked over a whole career. There's a smaller version of this hiding in everyday spending, too. $300 a month spent eating out, invested instead over 30 years, comes out to nearly $700,000. And restaurants are only the start. The streaming service you forgot you're paying for, the upgrade you didn't need, the subscription renewing quietly in the dark every month. Each one feels tiny, alone. Stacked together over a decade, they quietly siphon off the exact money that could have made you free. A raise is only ever worth what it eventually buys you. Spent, it buys a slightly nicer month. Invested, it buys whole years of freedom later on. And the rules are more generous than most people realize. In 2026, the government lets you shelter $24,500 a year inside a 401k and thousands more if you're over 50. Rule 7. There was never going to be a shortcut. We live surrounded by a loud, constant promise that wealth can arrive fast. The right coin, the right flip, the right side hustle, the right hot tip whispered at the right moment. And suddenly, you're set for life. The quiet millionaires are living proof that promise is mostly a lie. Their real method is almost insultingly boring, and that dullness is precisely why it works, because almost nobody has the stomach to actually do it. Remember that number from the study. The average quiet millionaire took 28 years to get there. 28 years of investing through booms and busts, through the years the market crashed and the years it soared, without ever stopping the contributions. Here's the arithmetic that should give you genuine hope. About $550 a month, invested steadily at the market's long-run return across those 28 years, quietly crosses $1 million. That's the entire secret. No windfall, no magic trick, just a modest amount, automated and left completely alone for a very long time. Adrienne, a claims adjuster worth just over $1 million, told me the truest thing I heard in this whole project. She said the hardest part was never earning the money, and it wasn't even saving it. What nearly broke her was doing the same dull thing for decades while the entire world screamed at her to try something more exciting. When the market fell by more than half in 2008, she kept right on buying. Every headline promised faster riches somewhere else. She calmly ignored every one of them. Fidelity's own numbers tell the same quiet story. The people sitting on seven-figure retirement accounts today didn't trade their way there. They stayed in the same plan, contributing without drama, decade after decade. No genius stock pick, no lucky moment. Time in the market made them, one boring paycheck at a time. So step back and look at what these 7 rules actually are. Every one of them is the same quiet move, wearing a different outfit. Ordinary income, no performance for anyone watching, started early, bought the whole market, killed the debt, ignored the shortcuts. Let time do the rest. Do that quietly for long enough, and you become the person on your street nobody would ever suspect, and that door doesn't lock behind them. It's still standing wide open. So tell me, Which of these 7 rules hit the hardest? Which one have you been quietly breaking for years without even realizing it? If there's a quiet millionaire in your own life, a parent, a mentor, an old boss who lived on far less than they made, tell me their story in the comments. And write down the one rule you're flipping first. The ones who say it out loud are usually the ones who actually follow through.